morning, folks. This is Deb Della Harpsichord sitting in for Deb Della Metronome, who was sitting in for Deb Della Piana. And this is your chain reaction report. You know, I have been, first of all, as anyone who has been paying attention to my activities the last couple of days, you know that we are switching gears. We're not going to become ungovernable anymore. We're going to be the Factivist Project. You know, that is an in-process change that is going on that is not yet complete. And I'm going to turn this light off because I'm not sure what good this is doing. And I'm not quite sure when that's going to be complete because I have to do it in between working hours, etc. But it's coming. So as such, we deal in facts. And there are a lot of facts out there right now that are just not totally complete. I must say this. I have been out there sparring with people who support Garrett Soldano for governor of Michigan. To run against, to replace Gretchen Whitmer, who, by the way, has managed to do her job protecting the public health until, of course, the right-wingers decided to strip her of her emergency powers. And now they're, of course, and Garrett Soldano is leading the charge to be out there whining that she's missing in action. Well, she's missing in action because you put her in a position where she is missing in action, okay? And you're not even an elected official yet. And I consider the people who have taken away her powers to be responsible for the surge in COVID in Michigan. Live with it. You caused it. You fucking deal with it. So all I kept hearing from these people as I was discussing with about how much hate there is on the left. Is that fucking right? Is that right? Well, we're going to talk about hate, bigotry, white supremacy, and all kinds of stuff this morning, right? So, without further ado, let's start. We're going to start, because we can, with Lauren Boebert. Let me read something to you here. Quote, "You fucking Muslim piece of shit." And I am not using the little ... dots. The words are coming out the way they intend to be read, all right? If you don't like the words, I know I offended some people in the little Garrett Soldano group by swearing. If you don't like the words, turn it off. If you don't want to hear about yourselves, turn it off. Okay, let me start over. Quote, "You fucking Muslim piece of shit, you jihadist. We know that you are a fucking traitor. You will not live much longer." End quote. That is a message sent to Ilhan Omar, who is, of course, a Somali American and Muslim lawmaker who was duly elected to office legitimately. And this came after this post from the highly ignorant, incendiary, low-life legislator from Colorado named Lauren Boebert. This is her tweet. "I was getting into an elevator with one of my staffers. We're leaving the Capitol and we're going back to my office. And we get in an elevator and I see a Capitol police officer running hurriedly to the elevator. I see fret all over his face and he's reaching and the door's shutting like I can't open it, like what's happening. I look to my left and there she is, Ilhan Omar, and I said, quote, 'Well, she doesn't have a backpack, we should be fine,' end quote. So we only had one floor to go. I said, quote, 'Oh look, the jihad squad decided to show up for work today,' end quote. perhaps when you talk about hate and vitriol, you're talking about yourselves. We're not done yet. We are not done yet. So then, after she received a lot of blowback for what she said, she decided to issue an apology. But she did not apologize to Ilhan Omar. Instead, she issued a dubious apology. She apologized for potentially hurting the feelings of other people. You know, she apologized for the act of potentially offending people. She's not even quite sure she offended anyone. This is how low-life scum like Lauren Boebert, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to call people for what they are here since you're doing it. This is how low-life scum put the responsibility back on the victim as opposed to taking responsibility. And her little apology in some amounted to the fact that she's sorry if she offended anyone, right? But she said that she will always put America first. Unlike other people. In a video statement, she called requiring her to give a public apology. Cancel culture. And that unlike other people, she will always put America first. That's not an apology. That is continuing the incendiary content of what she's saying. You know, this also then prompted, why wouldn't it? The orange jackaloon, you know, our dime store dictator. That's him, Donald Trump, to release a lie-filled statement. And this is what he said. He told her that she should apologize to her country for, quote, abandoning her own country. And then he goes on to say, and this is a quote, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar should apologize for marrying her brother, committing large-scale immigration and election fraud, wishing death to Israel, and for essentially abandoning her former country, which doesn't even have a government. Exactly what she'd like to see for the United States, end quote. You know what? We would be happy to let the right wing live their lives if all they wanted to do was live their lives their way. But what they actually want to do is dictate the content of who lives in America. And that would be strictly white people. You know what? Some of us aren't actually interested in any of that homogenization of our society. The GOP, and I'm going to state this flat out, is useless to the American people. You know, it's pointing at the left for being all of the violent talk, all of the violent rhetoric. When 13 lawmakers crossed the aisle to vote on a bill that benefits the American people, what do? Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene released the names of the 13 lawmakers from the Republican Party who crossed the aisle to vote for Joe Biden's infrastructure bill. Okay? And she releases the name, and all of the people who are calling these people now on the phone are flooding them with angry calls and death threats. Fred Upton received a death threat for voting for the bill. This is what the Republicans spend their time doing. I mean, I don't understand what you don't understand about all of this. Okay? So Fred Upton, an 18-term moderate, received a death threat. And his death threat was, quote, "You're a fucking piece of shit traitor. I hope you die." And he also said that he hoped that Upton's staff and his family dies as well. We can't even have an infrastructure bill in this country without this kind of hate and vitriol. And Kevin McCarthy, who is supposed to rein in these beasts, sits back in his haunches and does absolutely nothing except try to find ways to punish the 13 people. A man who threatened to strip any Republican who cooperated with the January 6th Commission. And let's not even go into that, because I've made a video on that, and I'm going to put a link to that in here as well. I have a 3-hour video, which I'm sure will be way too much for anybody on the right to watch, because there's plenty of facts in that. And Kevin McCarthy, by the way, who does nothing to rein in his people, is apparently not MAGA enough for Marjorie Taylor Greene, since we suddenly have a freshman who barely knows what civility is, a freshman legislator who barely knows what her job is. If you've taken a look at Marjorie Taylor Greene's, go to the .gov site where all the bills are filed. If you looked at the bills she's filed, she hasn't filed one decent bill to benefit the American people. Every one of her bills is based on bigotry. We have a punk Republican freshman congressperson making demands about what the next Speaker of the House should be when they take back power in 2022. We have from now to a year from now. What is she doing focusing on that? She has a job to do. Her job is a public servant to the American people. Her job isn't to sit in her office and make demands about what the next speaker should look like. I'm not done yet. I'm going to state this uncategorically, I should say. Let's talk about Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle Rittenhouse as it has been stated so eloquently in the Boston Globe, had the privilege of white boyhood to get him off. A crying jag that actually, I don't know, a crying jag that looked so staged to me. It was ridiculous. And now, of course, he's a hero. We offer him internships. We offer him a Congressional Medal of Honor. That was Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way. We're going to put him in a league with other people who have received the Congressional Medal of Honor. What an affront to this country this is. There's more behind this story, however. Kyle Rittenhouse posing with the Proud Boys, which was kept from the jury. Kyle Rittenhouse sitting in a bar, drinking and singing with the Proud Boys, which was kept from this jury. The fact that the Kenosha police went out there on social media and invited people to come and defend the city. Because why? Because the police also have a drive program for troubled youth, and that is where Kyle Rittenhouse came from, where they show you how to operate guns, and you drive in a police car. You convince people like Kyle Rittenhouse that their job is to protect this and protect that. That's the job of the fucking police. The National Guard was already called up. There are allegations that the cops pushed these people into the hands of armed white supremacists. Camera film shows them thanking them, giving them water, encouraging them. And we don't have racism problems in America. We're all tired of hearing your bullshit. We're all tired of hearing your bullshit. Let me read you some of this. Despite the obvious safety threats, the law enforcement embraced the incendiary presence of armed civilians and militia groups. In a widely seen video, this is right in front of your faces, people. So maybe you want to be in denial because you're a right-winger. Well, you be in denial, but this shit doesn't lie. Law enforcement thanked and even offered water to armed civilians and militia groups attending the protest, and they instructed those protesting police brutality to leave. In text messages retrieved through our public records requests after someone circulated a video of the Rittenhouse shootings, a Waukesha County Sheriff's Department officer commented, "Nice video," in a message to colleagues and added he was listening to gunfire. Such a nice night. We don't have white supremacists in the police departments. We have them in the police departments across the nation. We have Proud Boys and Oath Keepers in our police departments. It appears Kenosha law enforcement coordinated an effort to push protesters south on Sheridan Road towards armed civilians and militia groups because they know how to deal with it. These are the words of one of those militiamen. Kenosha Police Department made a conscious decision to abandon the people of Kenosha to people they felt justified in using machines and weapons of war against, and we're going to piss them off and drive them at us and let the chips fall where they may. The Kenosha County Sheriff's Department, led by Sheriff Beth, commanded law enforcement agencies to clear Civic Center Park and push protesters south towards the danger that lay multiple blocks from the park at the intersection of 60th and Sheridan. Multiple law enforcement officers documented their knowledge that armed civilians and militia members were concentrated in that direction. Officers from various law enforcement agencies described the use of armored vehicles, foam bullets, tear gas, and flashbangs to herd protesters from the park towards that intersection and to prevent the return of protesters to the park. No one's talking about how Kyle Rittenhouse, in self-defense, shot one of the people in the back 7 times. No one's talking about any of that. The judge in the case refused to call the dead people victims. That's what they were, regardless of whether he was defending himself. The judge also made it possible for several things not to be presented to the jury, and the judge, in fact, shaped the jury's evidence for them. And this is all based on the fact that we have a white privileged society here in America, and that is the way the GOP wants to keep it. We have a GOP now that might as well put on white robes. We have 147 legislators who voted to overturn the election with absolutely no evidence of any election fraud whatsoever in order to keep the power in this country in the hands of a dime store dictator with little knowledge of what diplomacy or public service looks like. We have a former president who endorsed Jair Bolsonaro, a dictator in Brazil. And the makeup of the Republican Party gets worse. We're up to burning books in Texas, removing them from school libraries, right? We have not only got Garrett Soldano posing with weapons on his website on the day when there was another shooting in a Detroit suburb, a man who basically spread medical misinformation with absolutely no knowledge of infectious diseases. Now we've got Dr. Oz running to replace Rand Paul as the biggest crank in the fucking Senate. Dr. Oz, a crackhead who, he's a #1 diet king. Not one of his supplements works on anything. And even though he's managed to live in New Jersey, he's suddenly running for the Senate in Pennsylvania. Why? Because one of Donald Trump's minions crashed and burned. Dr. Oz, brought to you by Oprah Winfrey, but he's running as a conservative Republican to save America because he can handle COVID. He's a doctor. He's a crackhead. He's a crank. And he is a medical misinformation specialist. The entire GOP is either composed of people now who are white supremacists or medical cranks, quacks, as we like to call them. And again, I'll repeat this. The only people that have benefited by the Republicans in the last decade or more are the wealthy. I can't think of one bill, and I can't find one bill that actually benefits the American people. They grudgingly gave money to the people during the pandemic. Not one of them voted in favor of Joe Biden's package to help the people during the pandemic. They don't care about the pain they inflict on the American people, not even their own constituents, many of whom are poor. Just like poor black people, you have poor white people. Even though 62% of the American public is in favor of the infrastructure bill, and polls will show that, and polls will show that Republicans are as well. It isn't just the left, and it isn't just the center, and it isn't them alone. There are Republican people out there who are in favor of the infrastructure package. We have a country where bridges are falling apart. We have a country where discussing infrastructure used to be a routine matter. Now it's a major cause to pay people back for voting for it. And in spite of the fact that 62% of the public is in favor of this bill, they're supposed to be doing the will of the people. This is supposed to be our country. What are they doing? They're paying back the 13 people who voted for the people. You know what? Let's close this by talking about the latest shooting. I have some notes here. And then I'm going to read something to you again. Oh, wait, you know what? I did forget one more thing. Let's talk about the role of the Attorney General. The Attorney General in this country is the highest law enforcement representative in the land. If you are running for the Attorney General in your state, you're the highest law enforcement person in your state. Louis Boebert, not only a COVID denier and anti-masker, but a man who flaunts the law constantly, wants to run for the Attorney General of Texas, where they're now burning books, banning abortion, banning masks, and generally making a mess of the fucking state, which was already in bad enough trouble. The Attorney General organization of the United States there, the Republican Attorney General, donated $150,000. Let me see what the total is. $150,000? $150,000 towards the insurrection. Okay? $150,000 was donated by the Republican Attorney General Association. The people who represent the highest ranking law enforcement group in the country donated to the insurrection. That should tell you something. They not only donated, but they used their organization to invite people and encourage people to show up in Washington. Now let's get to the shooter. We have yet another child with a gun. Another child whose father bought a gun, a Sig Sauer, on Black Friday. Along with, by the way, I might add 700,000 people in America bought guns that day. Because we have a uniquely American problem here in America. We have an obsession with guns, and all of our problems are solved by guns. I don't know. We have a long history with white supremacy, and we have a long history with vigilantism. And it has always been white vigilantism in America. The Ku Klux Klan was a vigilante organization. And there is nothing, I believe, nothing more than what a lot of people on the right would like to see. That people like Kyle Rittenhouse on the streets with AR-15s protecting their sovereign land. Just like the Charlottesville riots over the taking down of a fucking statue. When Donald Trump didn't want to discourage that kind of activity. In fact, he wanted to promote it. And many of the groups that were at Charlottesville that caused that violence were also at the Capitol building in January of this year. And now we have another teen shooter, a 15-year-old who kills now 4 people. A 14-year-old, a 15-year-old, and 2 17-year-olds in a school who pretended to be a sheriff to gain access to certain areas. A boy who has been a problem, whose parents met with the school just before the shooting. No one knows how he got a hold of that Sig Sauer. The one his father bought on Black Friday. And it certainly was a Black Friday. He not only killed 4, he wounded 7. And he would have killed more. One of the 17-year-olds he killed actually rushed him to try to stop him from killing more. And he lost his life. Kyle Rittenhouse isn't a fucking hero. That kid's a fucking hero. Hang on a second. I want to read to you something that the mother of what's his name here? I don't even want to say this kid's name, okay? Ethan Crumbley. Ethan Crumbley, okay? He's a 15-year-old sophomore. Let me just give you these facts before I read to you. He's been charged with 1 count of terrorism. He's been charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. There is ample evidence from his phone and from social media that this was planned well in advance. 7 counts of assault with intent to murder and 12 counts of firearm possession. He is being charged in his adult, and rightfully so. This was not an emotional response to being bullied. This was a planned attack on students and teachers. With a gun he shouldn't have had in his possession. And no one knows how he managed to get a hold of it. And by the way, there is potential for the parents being charged as well. They are not cooperating with police. So let me read this. Mr. Trump, I actually love that you are a bad public speaker because that showed sincerity and humility. You changed your mind and you said, so what? You made the famous grab them in the pussy comment. Did it offend me? No. I say things all the time that people take the wrong way. How do you take that the wrong way? Do I mean them? Not always. Do I agree that you should You should have shown your tax returns. No, I don't care what you do or maybe don't pay in taxes. I think those are personal. If the government can't lock somebody up over $10,000 of unpaid taxes and you slip by, then that shows the corruption. She supports the border wall. She wants him to uncover politicians for what they really are. Take a look around you, honey. Take a look around you. And she's not a bigot because she, quote, came straight off the boat in Italy. My grandmother did too. She was nothing like this one. Here we go. Quote, as a female and a realtor, thank you for allowing my right to bear arms as a female and a realtor, because, hey, they really need guns to protect themselves from those empty houses. Allowing me to be protected if I show a home to someone with bad intentions. Thank you for respecting that amendment. She complained about parents in other schools where, quote, kids come from illegal immigrant parents and, quote, don't care about learning. That's a bigoted, blanketed statement. It was signed this way. Quote, a hard-working, middle-class, law-abiding citizen who is sick of getting fucked in the ass and would rather be grabbed by the pussy. Some classy lady, huh? You know what, people? This group has every intention of continuing on with exposing the right. We are going to be making a website that does that. We do not believe that this version of the GOP belongs in power anywhere in America. We also believe that if Donald Trump runs again, we are doomed. He will be unbridled, uncontrollable, and he will make a bigger mess than he left the first time. I'd also like to remind you of something. Jair Bolsonaro, who he endorsed, the people in his country are demanding that he be investigated and prosecuted for mishandling the pandemic there because they care about life. In America, we have the right wing killing themselves off at a rapid pace with this anti-vax bullshit. And you know, that would be just fine with me. The majority of the people dying right now are the people who are refusing to get vaccinated. The majority of the people who are refusing to get vaccinated in America are Republicans, conservatives. So they're killing their ranks as we go. But the problem with all of that is they're killing innocent people too. And that is not okay. That is not your right. No, we're not going to sit idly by while the right continues to point the fingers at the wrong group of people for violence, hate, vitriol. We're not the people who want to dismantle this country. We are not the people who want vigilante forces marauding around with automatic weapons. In fact, we want gun control here. We want a civil society. Anytime people think this is what civility looks like, there's something wrong with you. I'll talk to you all later.